I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the death of a father of three who died after drinking a Moscow Mule prepared by his wife. Prosecutors say it wasn't a plain Moscow Mule and have charged her with murder. Here's the story. Eric and Kouri Richins seem to be living the perfect little life. The attractive young couple had 3 young boys and were doing very well financially living in Utah. They traveled, had a beautiful home, and spent a lot of family time with their boys. But beneath the exterior, something else was happening here. Family members say Eric suspected his wife of trying to poison him, giving him food and drinks laced with poison. Eric got so suspicious that he changed his life insurance and his will to give his money to his sister, who he trusted to take care of the kids. Now prosecutors say Eric was right. He died in March of 2022, a victim of fentanyl poisoning. After his death, Kouri wrote a book for her children to help them deal with the loss of their father. And just after the release of the book, Kouri was arrested and charged with the murder of her husband, Eric. This is a big one. This is a big one. It's coming up relatively soon on Court TV. And now we're getting a better idea about some of the evidence in the case because of the pretrial motions that are happening, where you've got the defense trying to get certain evidence excluded from the case, kept away from the jury, alleging violations of the rights of Kouri Richins. So I want you to take a listen to this. It's an interesting moment in court. And there's some argument about a particular item that was found inside of Kouri Richins' home during an initial search. Take a listen.
Okay, so you're down there, you're with her when she's being arrested. Meantime, there's officers searching her home up in Camas, right?
Correct.
And at some point, you get a phone call from one of the officers on the scene, is that right?
I don't recall. I'm sure I took lots of phone calls that day.
Did they advise you that they had found something in the search that was not within the permission of the warrant?
I don't recall.
Recall being told?
Go ahead, Mr. Bloodworth.
Your Honor, I think this goes to the seizure of the orange notebook, which is issue 4 in the defense motion to suppress statements and evidence.
Right.
As we discussed last Thursday, the state has conceded that the state seized that notebook on May the 8th, 2023, beyond the scope of the warrant that Ms. Nestor is addressing.
So you get this call that they find a notebook in her house, right?
I don't.
Well, go ahead.
Your Honor, I don't know that we're fully clear on this issue.
Let me sound out what I understand is the possible benefit of this. Are you preserving the ability to argument that there was a gap in time between when the notebook was actually found and when it would have inevitably found?
Yes.
And during that gap in time, they learned some things that is fruit of the poisonous tree?
Yes.
State has conceded that the search on May 8th that discovered the content of the orange notebook was beyond the scope of the initial May 8th warrant to search the home. Based on information obtained from the orange notebook.
At that time?
At that time on May 8th, there was a second warrant written to search the home on May 8th for a notebook. The state is conceding that that second warrant, the portion of that second warrant to search for notebooks, there were other collateral issues that don't touch on this, was invalid because it relied on information discovered in the notebook pursuant to a search beyond the original warrant.
May we pause here for just a moment? I think this discussion would be more detailed and fruitful if you both weren't worried about seeding the public record with a bunch of stuff you don't want potential jurors to know about. That is a sufficient basis to close these proceedings briefly to have a more detailed discussion about this topic. So, everybody who is on that side of the bar, including all of you, I need you to step out now.
A little touchy here when it comes to this piece of evidence. Now, investigators didn't follow the law in the seizure of this orange notebook, but they don't want any discussion of it in open court. Which brings me to the first question in our investigation. It's about that orange notebook. What is in the orange notebook? And I'm not just being nosy here, but obviously it's something significant and important, but perhaps very prejudicial to the defendant. They don't want it discussed in open court because it likely won't come into the trial. But what's going on in that orange notebook? What did they find out? What did they learn? Let's see if we can answer it. Joining me, an attorney representing the victim, Kouri Richins' family, Greg Skordas is with us, and nationally known psychotherapist and host of the Talking Live and Bite-Sized podcast, Dr. Robbie Ludwig. All right, Greg, you always know a lot more than I do about some of the facts and intricacies of what's happening in this case. I'll tell you what I know, all right, which is why Dr. Robbie Ludwig is with us. I believe that it has something to do with her therapist and her. So what do we know about the orange notebook?
Well, just that, Vinny, and not much more can be disclosed at this point. The defense has argued, as you just heard, and you played that very well, that the notebook was found. The police were in the house serving a warrant. The warrant listed certain things to find, and the notebook was not among those things. So the police opened the notebook nonetheless, found additional evidence, and went back and got another warrant based on, arguably, the information they saw in the notebook, which they shouldn't have opened. And that's the defense contention. There's some concern about some entries in the notebook that we would call therapist-patient records, which are privileged anyway. And so they may have a privilege that they wouldn't come in because they're part of the sort of, we call it a doctor-patient relationship, but in this case, it's a therapist. And that's part of the reason, another reason the defense doesn't want it in, because of some information that Kouri was sharing with her therapist and some things that she was going through at that time, allegedly.
Now let's just clarify before we go to Dr. Robbie Ludwig. When we talk about at that time, all of this is after Eric has died, right? And how much after is this notebook discovered? Is it a year later? Is it a month later? About what time are we talking here?
It's quite a bit later, Vinny. It's because the police weren't doing much of an investigation until they were given some information almost a year after the homicide that led them to go back into the house and do some things and get the warrant. So we're talking many months later. We're talking quite a significant period of time after the homicide.
Okay, Dr. Robbie Ludwig, it seems she had a therapist. This is after the death of her husband. Obviously, she's been accused of causing that death, but what type of things generally do patients put into these notebooks? What would you expect that these writings to be perhaps about?
Well, you know, she is able to talk about a previous crime that she's committed as long as she doesn't talk about a current crime. So, you know, did she admit to having something to do with killing her husband? Is that in there? Does she talk about wanting to see him dead or being miserable in the marriage and wanting to escape? Does she talk about a lover and, you know, a conversation that she had with a lover, which could be incriminating, or with a family member? So clearly there's information in there that could be prejudicial. But if she was talking about a current crime she was committing, that's something the therapist would have to report. So it is a little bit curious as to what's in there.
Let me follow up on that. And what is the purpose? If you have a patient and they're home with a notebook, is that part of the process to sort of write things out, do some journaling, and how much guidance and how much interaction would the therapist have with that notebook and what's written in the notebook?
You know, I don't really use a notebook when I'm working with patients. We do psychotherapy, we do talk therapy. Occasionally, I'll give them an assignment. If a patient wants to keep a journal, that's totally up to them, but it's not something I would recommend doing. It's just not the way I work. It could have been something that Kouri felt was therapeutic for her, and therefore introduced it to the therapy, or maybe the therapist recommended that Kouri write down things that were upsetting to her or important to her or traumatic to her. You know, that's certainly possible as well, but it's not typical practice for every therapist and patient.
Interesting. All right. Dr. Robbie Ludwig, great to see you tonight. Thank you so much. Greg Score is going to stay with us.
Great being here. Thank you.
Coming up next, and this is at an important moment in this investigation, was Kouri crying?
Need some air?
No, I'm right in front of my neighbor's house. Like, this is so embarrassing. I want any air.
A Ponzi scheme and a deadly poisoning.
A former pharmacist already convicted in a federal fraud case.
Now stands trial for the murder of her husband.
The financial crime gives rise to motive.
Did Natalie Cochran kill to cover up other crimes?
We're not here to obtain convictions. We're here to obtain the truth.
Now a jury will decide her fate, and Court TV will bring you every minute.
The Ponzi Scheme Murder Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
I asked her to step out of the vehicle, informed her that she was being detained, and had her come back and sit in the passenger seat of my vehicle.
Did there come a time when you recorded any of your interaction with the defendant?
Yes, when I got back to my vehicle, I realized that I didn't have a body camera, and so I turned on the video of my department-issued cell phone.
And where did you kind of set that video as it was recording?
I placed it down by my right leg, kind of between the seats, near where the cup holder would be.
There's points in the video where you can hear the defendant something like cry. Do you know those points I'm asking about?
Yes.
At any point during the video, including those particular points, did you observe any tears coming from the defendant's eyes?
I did not.
So there he is, Eric Maynor from the Summit County Sheriff's Office, who has Kouri Richins with him. And as he explained, no body cam, but he did have his cell phone. So he pressed record on the video, but you don't see much in the video, but you can hear what's happening, and the interaction with him and Kouri Richins is in his vehicle while they're searching the home. This is shortly after the death of Eric Richins. So let's take a listen to that recording. And one of the big issues is, how is Kouri acting? How is she reacting to this situation?
Trying to take the house?
I don't think so.
And that's her body you can see there, just part of her sweatshirt.
Yes.
And that's the thing for the laptop that's blocking the view.
Yeah.
Is the lady, the one lady that I've been talking to, Detective?
You turn it up at all, Alex?
Woody?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, she's coming over so shallow.
Why didn't she just talk to me on the phone? Why didn't I just go? What is going on?
I don't know. Mom's helping out, okay?
Oh my God. Why didn't you knock on my door?
Huh?
I mean, you just knock on my door.
Well, we would have. Like I said, I'll just let the detectives explain when they get here, okay?
Can you just call my mom?
I just need to sit with you here until they get here.
Oh my God, I think
You need some air?
no, I'm right in front of my neighbor's house. Like, this is so embarrassing. I want any air. Why did they tell me not to go down? I don't know why they told me not to just go. Dang, does that mean I'm arrested for something?
No, you're not arrested.
I don't know why it's happening.
At this point, Ms. Richins does not know she's being recorded on a phone, right? You didn't tell her you were recording her.
No.
It's because my sister-in-law saw all the stuff at my house. I can take it.
I don't know about that. Look, you're not in handcuffs. You're just detained for a minute.
I don't know what is going on.
Quick eyes on, has picked her up leaving house, so she is in hand right now. We'll still plan on staging at the same location, same time. We'll just leave K30 over by the house, make sure everything's secure, and then I'll head over to the Star building and make sure everyone's on the same page.
Why would I be in handcuffs anyway? I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, I just need to hold on to you till I get here to talk, okay?
Interesting dynamic there. What's going on in her mind? How is she feeling, and what does this reveal? Right, this is just after, but now all of a sudden she's in a car, they're searching the home. Brings us to the next question in our investigation. It's about this recording in this moment. Was Kouri crying? The deputy said he didn't see tears. She sounded upset. What exactly is going on here? Still with me, attorney Greg Skordas, and joining me, retired police commander, host of the podcast Profiling Evil, and author of the book Deceived. He is in Utah, where all this is happening, Mike King. Mike, what are your thoughts? What are you hearing from Kouri Richins at this moment?
You know, Vinnie, it's so difficult to try to assess what the emotion is when you don't have more to go off of. I don't know what she's like in normal circumstances when she's under stress. I think it's interesting. The one comment that really jumped out to me was when she said, "This is embarrassing," thinking about the neighbor seeing her in that car. Holy cow, her husband just died, and she's worried about being embarrassed. And that's a little troubling to me. But again, how do you assess whether someone should cry or not? We have this automatic reflex to want to ingest our own emotional state of mind in crises onto other people. And some folks just handle it differently.
Greg, what's going on at this point in the case and the investigation? Because they are doing a search, right? They've got her in the back of this sheriff's vehicle, and this is shortly after Eric has died.
Right. They're doing their investigation. They're doing what they should be doing. She's in the car. She's not free to leave at that time, although she's not technically under arrest. They're not taking her anywhere. And the officer decides, just for whatever reason, to record her, which is not illegal, and it's not something that needs to be disclosed or has to have her consent. She's in the car, she's doing things, she's reacting to the situation, and the state feels that reaction doesn't necessarily show the kind of grief that Kouri is wanting everyone to believe she was suffering at the time. So the state has a use for it, the defense has a use to keep it out, and the judge is going to have to decide whether and to what extent that video and that particular piece of evidence is going to come in when the case ultimately gets before the jury.
So, Mike, as you said, I think correctly, people will inject their own state of emotion in there trying to figure something out. But ultimately, it'll be a bunch of folks from Utah who may very well hear that recording, the ones who have to judge Kouri Richins. What are your thoughts?
You know, Vinny, and I'm so glad to be on with Greg. I think back at what a great prosecutor he was. This thing really gets to me because I think a jury is going to resonate with this idea of why isn't she more upset? Why aren't tears just flowing out of her eyes? Why isn't she almost convulsing at the loss of her loved one. And so I think what we have to do is just plan on the fact that the prosecution is going to try to get a jury that's going to be emotionally caught up and is very family oriented and tied into a spouse and the need for a family. And they're going to bank on the fact that those emotions are going to carry them over and not buy this. The defense is going to have to somehow convince them, if this makes it into the trial, that this is just the way she responds under duress.
And Greg, do you think prosecutors need evidence like this, or can they rely upon everything else they have?
Well, this is just one piece. I mean, this case has so many nuances, so many twists and turns, and so much evidence, probably from both sides, in all fairness. And the prosecution doesn't need this, but they want it. It's helpful to their case, which is why the defense doesn't want it in. So it's not critical to the case. It's probably not going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back for one side or the other. But yes, it's helpful to the case to show her mindset, to show what she was experiencing at the time, and to just show how she reacts. I mean, this woman is cold. She's not one that reacts. I assume the only time she cried during this whole episode was when she was told Eric had changed the beneficiary of his life insurance policy, because she just hasn't shown the kind of emotion, except when the cameras are on, except when people are watching her, that you would expect from someone who lost their husband.
And Mike, what are your overall thoughts about Kouri Richins and the way she's presented herself since the death of her husband?
I'll tell you what, Vinny, this one, of course, I spent a lot of time in law enforcement looking at cases like this, and I think there are so many things stacking up against her. She's going to have a hard time convincing a jury of anything other than the fact that she had responsibility in this, just based on all the evidence that we've seen publicly. Now, the defense certainly is doing a great job, and some of these challenges that are coming up, things we've talked about on this show, are going to be really interesting if they can keep those from coming into the trial. But if they can't, I think this is going to be a really tall mountain for her to climb.
And there are a lot of nice mountains out there in Utah, aren't there?
Yes, there are.
Mike King, Profiling Evil, thank you so much. Greg Score is going to stick with us. While she's been incarcerated, there was a letter that was uncovered, the Walk the Dog letter. Up next, why did Kouri write the letter? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the death of Eric Richins, a successful father of three who married a woman who had a failing house flipping business. When Eric died, investigators zeroed in on his wife, Kouri. Here's the story. Kouri Richins was working at Home Depot when she met her husband, Eric. Eric owned an extremely successful company and was doing well financially. Eric and Kouri fell in love and started a family. They were raising 3 young boys when the marriage hit the rocks. There was tension over money connected to Kouri's struggling house flipping business and issues involving infidelity. Things got so bad, Eric thought Kouri was trying to poison him. Eric died of fentanyl poisoning after drinking a Moscow Mule prepared by Kouri. Prosecutors say she laced the drink to get his money, but Kouri claims her innocence and may argue that Eric had a drug problem and OD'd. Either way, there are 3 boys without a dad and with a mom accused of murder. A Moscow Mule. That's a new one. That's a new one. Okay. So when she gets charged, and it's about a year after Eric passes away that she gets charged, she is incarcerated. And while incarcerated, there was a search of her cell, and as a result, the state brought a motion for a no-contact order. Let me put that up on the screen. Very revealing here. On September 14th, 2023, Summit County Sheriff's deputies searched the cell block where the defendant is being housed. The search revealed a 6-page handwritten letter that the defendant wrote to her mother, Lisa Darden, hidden inside a book in the defendant's cell. The letter is evidence of witness tampering. Okay. So what is in this letter? They refer to this as the walk the dog letter because across the top it says walk the dog. Has some sort of a meaning here. But we took a look at this letter, and I want you to take a look and a listen as one of my producers reads it.
She wants to link Eric getting the drugs and pills from Mexico, so we need some kind of connection. Her private investigator is doing some research on the ranch cartel place Eric would stay at. Here's what I'm thinking, but you have to talk to Ronnie. He would probably have to testify to this, but it's super short, not a lot to it. He will need to talk to Sky at the meeting next week. Upon information and belief, just like they say, a year prior to Eric's death, Ronnie was over watching football one Sunday, and Eric and Ronnie were chatting about Eric's Mexico trips. Eric told Ronnie he gets pain pills and fentanyl from Mexico from the workers on the ranch, but not to tell me because I would get mad because I always said he just gets high every night and won't help take care of kids. Ronnie should have texts from Eric talking about getting high as well. Eric told Ronnie he keeps them in an allergy pill bottle in his work truck so I wouldn't find them. Ronnie never told me about the conversation. Eric finally told me and asked if Carmen could get him some. Eric never wanted anyone to know he had an issue, especially get caught. He always wanted Kouri to go down for him. Reword this however he needs to make the point just to include it all. The connection has to be made with Mexico and the drugs. Ronnie will have the messages to prove Eric confided in him about getting high. He can be short and to the point, but it has to be done. When you talk to Ronnie about this, meet up with him in person. I worry sometimes your house and phone are bugged. Tell him I need him to do this. Bring me home, and then we will get those damn bitches. We're so close to the end. Let's push through. Have the conversation with Ronnie before he meets with Sky. Then tell him to tell Sky at the meeting about the conversation. Hang in there. We're almost there. Love you to the moon.
Wow. Ronnie's her brother. Sky was her attorney at the time. Some powerful stuff in there. Brings us to the next question in our investigation. So, why did Kouri write the letter? The walk the dog letter. Why did Kouri write the letter? Joining me, former homicide detective, host of The Interview Room with Chris McDonough. It's Chris McDonough, and the host of the Hidden True Crime podcast and YouTube channel, Lauren Mathias, is with us as well. All right, there is so much to this walk the dog letter. It is unreal. I'll begin with you, Lauren. Your thoughts about why she wrote this, what the purpose was, what do you think was going on here?
Well, according to the prosecution and the state, as you pointed out, they think it's witness tampering, that they wanted her to convince her brother Ronnie to testify a certain way. But according to Kouri, it was part of a fictional book that she was writing, that it was one of many pages that the state has taken out of context. And interestingly enough, at this hearing that I was there and I witnessed some body cam footage, they show the search of her cell where this is found, and it is a little confusing as to where it was found. The state says that it was found in an LSAT book, where Kouri and the defense are sort of trying to claim that no, this was found in a manila envelope titled attorney-client privilege. And there's certainly some division among what this is, why it was written, and where it was found. And that holds a lot of weight, I think, when it comes to whether or not this can be used as evidence in the trial.
Yeah, to me, it is powerful evidence if it comes in. Chris McDonough, your thoughts about this letter, and when you read it, what did you take away from it?
I took away who's the Oscar go to? And it's probably chapter 1 of this long, secondary novel now that she's presented, in her defense. When somebody goes to this kind of effort to write these types of, communications to family members, I mean, you're in custody for homicide. You're sitting in a jail where there's no expectation of privacy. And at any time, the jailers can come in and do a search of your, cell there. So the fact that she's arguing now that, hey, this was privileged attorney-client information. Well, there's a real fine line there. It has to be for legal reasons, and I think the state's arguing correctly that, no, she has no standing in this. That's my feeling on that.
Well, here's the transcript of Kouri's jail call with her brother about this letter, which she says isn't a letter. Kouri Richins, that's what it comes down to. Well, and they just keep saying it's a letter. It was never a letter. Like, it was part of a freaking book. Like, it was never a letter. It was never in an envelope. And then her brother says, it was part of the book you're writing? Yeah, so I was writing this book so basically it's like everything that happened up until like the detention hearing, and then at the detention hearing, I actually get out of jail. So it's like a fiction mystery kind of book, Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. It's a 65-page novel. I'm not believing that. Lauren, am I too skeptical?
Look, I don't believe the novel bit at all. Not one bit. I think it's pretty clear when you hear it and when you read it what it is. I think the question for me, though, I will say I have this question. I have a question after being at the evidentiary hearing where it was found. Because the sergeant and the corrections officer on stand said they found it in an LSAT book. But you can't completely see it. It's footage that nobody's seen. You had to be there to see it, and I saw it. And it almost looks as if it wasn't found in the book. The book is outside the cell, and it looks to have been found. There it is. There's some footage. Okay, thank you. And it looks to have been found inside a envelope. And then there's debate about whether or not it said attorney-client privilege or if it just said Sky Lazzaro's name. I think I want to know. I want to know where this is found. And there is, that I think is what's going to be telling whether or not it can be used in trial. If it is used in trial and they claim that it's a fictional book, no one's going to buy it.
That would be absolutely silly to do. Okay. Got more to get to. Chris McDonough, thank you so much. Great to see you tonight. Still to come. Was Kouri a suspect?
If she had said, hey, I killed my husband, would you have used that against her?
Likely.
It's a whodunit Hollywood story.
Monica Cimentelli is accused of plotting to kill her husband.
Celebrity hairstylist Fabio Cimentelli.
The celebrity stylist murder trial continues Tuesday on Court TV.
He was an icon. They are in for the fight of their lives.
I want to turn your attention to and discuss your interaction with the defendant on April the 14th, 2023. Do you recall that day?
Yes.
At that point in time, what was your relationship with this case?
I had just been assigned as the lead investigator on the case. I was not familiar with all the details of the case. I was trying to get a fresh perspective and pretty much starting from scratch.
And as part of your start from scratch, did you want to introduce yourself to the defendant?
Yes, I wanted her to know that there had been a change, not only in the assignment of the lead investigator on her case, but there had been some supervisory changes to the investigations division as well.
And when you say her case, you mean the case at that point in time investigating the death of Eric Richins?
Correct.
Did you record that interaction with her?
Yes, I did.
How did you record it?
I had a audio recorder running, and then later I activated a body cam that I had with me.
This is a year after they switched the lead investigator in the case, and this is a new detective taking over, taking a look at the case. On the stand during this pretrial hearing, where again the defense is attempting to exclude evidence, that's ultimately the point of all of this. Let's take a listen to more of his testimony here, talking about his perspective on the case and his thoughts about Kouri Richins, and then the conversation he has with her.
What was your observation of the defendant's mood throughout the conversation?
She seemed very cheery, very open, happy to be talking with us, happy to have the opportunity to talk to investigators. She was outgoing.
At any time throughout your interaction with her on that day, did you observe her cry or become, did you observe tears fall from her eyes?
I didn't see tears, no.
Would you agree with me that when you prepared this affidavit that it was clear that Kouri Richins was a primary suspect of your investigation?
No, I wouldn't agree with that statement.
You would not?
No.
You didn't think she was a suspect at this point?
I didn't have definitive information that she was a suspect.
Okay. But you wanted to look in her phone, and you were asking a judge to let you look into a phone, right? Her phone.
Correct.
And you're asking to look into her phone, by your own words, to see if she tried to obtain fentanyl on her phone.
Yes, that's the part that's recalling my memory is at that time, with the limited information I had, the most important fact that I felt we knew was that Eric died of fentanyl overdose. Mm-hmm. So the biggest question to me was how the fentanyl got into his system. And in my opinion, there were basically 3 different ways that Eric could have died of a fentanyl overdose. It could have been an accidental overdose, it could have been a suicide, or it could have been a homicide. In order to be thorough, I was trying to investigate all 3 of those possibilities.
So 1 year after he died, you still had no idea whether it was a suicide, homicide, or an accident?
That's correct.
You talked about the fact that you all had ties in the community through soccer coaching and things like that, right?
Correct.
And then maybe she knew your wife or something?
That sounds familiar.
Okay. But you didn't tell her you were investigating her for homicide at any point in those 3 hours?
No.
You also didn't tell her you had a hidden recorder on your person, did you?
It wasn't.
Can you be specific at which point in time you're talking about?
When you first arrived at her house. Thank you, Your Honor.
No, the intention was not necessarily to hide it. The audio-only recorder was brought as redundancy in case of failure of equipment technology.
Where was it?
In my pocket.
Okay. Did you tell her
it wasn't visible to her?
Right.
But my intent was not to hide that I was recording her.
And you intended to go in there and ask Kouri questions directly about what happened with her husband's death, didn't you?
After she invited us in and consented to having us interview her, yes.
Right. When she invited you in, did you Mirandize her?
No.
If she had said, hey, I killed my husband, would you have used that against her?
Likely.
Yeah, likely. Well, this is interesting because this is a year later. And he's saying, well, no, I didn't know what happened. I didn't know if it was a homicide. So how could she be a suspect? But he's interviewing her. Brings us to the next question in our investigation. Was Kouri a suspect at that point during that interview by the new detective took over? Joining me, attorney representing victim Eric Richins' family, Greg Skordas, and still with us, podcaster Lauren Mathias. Greg, your thoughts at this point? Not a suspect a year later? I know people, I mean, the family was suspicious of her, to say the least, right?
Oh, the family had her as their prime suspect throughout. But if you recall the testimony or the questioning of the defense attorney, she said, was she your primary suspect? And he said, no. I mean, she was certainly a suspect, and he was certainly questioning her. But Miranda requires what we call a custodial interrogation. Was she in custody? No, she's in her living room. Was she being interrogated? No, she was being asked questions about fentanyl. So this argument that she should have been given Miranda, or hey, and she had confessed all of a sudden, you know, would you have used that against her? Of course they would have. But this wasn't a Miranda interview. It wasn't a custodial interrogation. It was an officer doing a job, picking up some pieces a year after a death and trying to find out if, in fact, there were any loose ends to that death. And he stated correctly, may have been an accident, may have been a suicide, it may have been a homicide. He has ability and the duty to investigate that, and that's what he was doing.
And, you know, Lauren, when we look at the case and the way this is going to play out in a courtroom, it seems the defense will say this was an accident, right? And here you are a year later, the new detective taking over, and I found that one question interesting, that at that point still didn't know which way this was going to go.
I agree. I thought it was an interesting point as well, Vinny, because not only was it a year after, you know, he died of this fentanyl poisoning, it was, or this alleged poisoning, it was less than a month before Kouri Richins was arrested and charged with murdering Eric. So, I mean, we're ending the investigation here, right? We're leading up to an arrest. There had been search warrants, and so it is an interesting statement to make. It was either accidental, it was either self-harm, or it was murder, and I had no idea. I think that she certainly was a suspect, as you know, we just heard there, but for him, I guess maybe coming on, was that it? That he was open-minded? Is that what he was sharing? I don't know, but it certainly feels like she would have been a suspect at that point.
And Eric, Greg, what is it that put it over the top here, that it went from, okay, new detective takes over, and now it's time to make an arrest because we believe that this is actually a murder committed by the defendant?
Well, without disclosing too much, Vinny, the family never gave up. They never gave up after Eric died. They knew that she had killed him. They knew how she killed him, and they weren't going to give up. So law enforcement came in and looked at this case as perhaps a overdose, an accidental death, because at that time, and even today, opioids are a huge problem, and people die of that poisoning all the time. So the investigation didn't really take off until people just wouldn't give up. The family just wouldn't give up, and they kept saying, you need to turn over the next stone. You need to do a little bit more. You need to dig a little deeper. And law enforcement did that. And to their credit, they put together a case, and ultimately, like you said at the beginning, Vinny, they decided there was enough evidence to take her into custody and charge her with a homicide, and that's exactly what they did. But this was the result of a very long and detailed investigation that the law enforcement officers had to do. They couldn't have arrested her a year earlier because they just didn't have enough evidence at that time.
We have about 25 seconds here, Lauren. What are your thoughts about her in the courtroom? Like, what sort of impression does she give off inside the courtroom?
You know, during that one moment with Detective O'Driscoll, this was a really interesting moment, was she was taking rapid notes during that time, a lot of notes, more notes than like the entire day put together during that testimony right there with Detective O'Driscoll. Notes, notes, notes. She was asking for more paper, taking more notes, taking more notes. She is a pretty stoic defendant, but when there are breaks, she was looking at her counsel, talking to her counsel. She was smiling with them. She seemed to have a confidence about her at this evidentiary hearing as well.
Big thank you, Lauren Mathias, the Hidden True Crime Podcast. It's amazing. Make sure you download it, folks. Greg Skordas, great to have you as well. We appreciate your valuable time. This story is tragic, but it seems Eric knew something could happen to him. He took steps to ensure that his children were taken care of, yet he stayed in the marriage, and he stayed in the home with the woman he suspected could harm him. It seems to me Eric was a man of character who tried to keep the family together so he could be a father to his children. And that is the biggest tragedy of all. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.